So what my sort of background is very simple. 30 years as a contractor, a subcontractor. I've worked as a consultant, and I did 10 years as the capital programme director at Manchester City Council, which is the best job I ever had. And for the past 3 years, I've been a consultant working for myself. And one of the jobs I do is I'm chair of the BIM Academy. Now, I was really pleased that Jason mentioned collaboration right at the beginning. I'm noticing more and more people finally coming up to speed with that, and we can have a bit of a look, can't we, at whether does BIM drive collaboration or do you need collaboration to make BIM work? And I know what I think. Let's see what you think. So, does BIM drive collaboration or does collaboration drive BIM? So, first one, does BIM drive collaboration? Do you need collaboration to make BIM work? Yeah. Great. Right answer. Okay, so the key thing really is that I haven't a clue about technology, and I don't care, actually. I'm not interested. And the point about the selfie was I can do that because the technology allows me to do it. And I've, through my career, been very keen to, in this industry that I absolutely love to bits, to make it more efficient, to make it safer, all the good things that I'm sure you will want to do. And so when BIM started coming onto my horizon, which is in the sort of about 2005, it was through my work at Salford University. The council and Salford University had a good working relationship. We would commission them to do work. This BIM thing started to appear. And I could see, God, this has got to be right. This has got to really, really work for us. And so we started getting involved with it. I started talking about it in these sorts of forum around about 2008. And the Northwest was very strong there, the Northeast also. And so, for me, it became a no-brainer. We've got to get this. The problem we had then was, although we had worked in a collaborative environment, we worked with, we had framework contractors, and we worked in open offices, all this sort of thing. We're very good on that. The reality was the industry was nowhere near it. So we started tinkering. We had a few projects that we ran where we would invest some money, and we found some real monetary benefit. So it was at that point that I decided to tell my employer. And that's an important point. We did it collaboratively, working together, tinkering, but there became a point at which actually the council needed to say, we want to use BIM on our projects where it's appropriate. And the business case that I prosecuted was a very simple one. And that was that the real benefits that we will get from using this new technology, whatever it is, are through the life of the building. The construction bit's all very well, but the facilities management and the asset management, that's where the big prize is. So that's my background, that's my thinking. So, tick in the box, it was a title that Jason came up with when we were talking together, and it's a bane of my life, really. We are through the procurement process. We have to tick the box. It's actually quite easy to get people to give you an answer that ticks the box, but it mustn't be about that, must it? It must be about using whatever this is to make your project better, to benefit your customer, to bring people into the industry, all those sorts of things. So it's almost like I'm not going to tell you how to tick the box. What I'm saying is I wish the boxes would disappear, but we're stuck with that. So what we're going to do, I'll go through some BIM in practice, which is pretty well sharing some of the stuff that I've done. Look at BIM strategy, because we need to talk about that. Refurbishment, facilities management, talk about culture and organisation, and then the really important bit for me is procurement, and then I'll have some closing thoughts. So, off we go. So, BIM in practice. This is a couple of images of the library in Manchester. Hopefully most of you know the building. And this was the first big job that we did as the council, where BIM became the key sort of tool in the way we worked. We didn't procure the project, which is it's just under 100 million with the two buildings that are there. And we were procuring it in about 2010, late 2010. And what we were doing in our normal working process was on big projects, we would establish a project office, we'd get contractors in there, supply chain, architects, engineers, all these good things, all in one room. And so we were getting quite good at actually working through some of the cultural challenges, some of the organisational challenges. But we hadn't thought, when we were procuring the library, of putting any BIM questions, making it BIM. It didn't seem a step for us to take. And what happened was Ryder Architecture won the job of being architects on the library. Ryder Architecture are 50% partner in the BIM Academy now. The other partner is Northumbria University. And they came for their sort of, right, well done, you've got the job. And I was walking through the office and he goes, oh, come and meet the MD of Ryder. And we had a chat and he said, you're interested in doing BIM. Can we make this a BIM job? And I just said, yes, let's do that. And so that was BIM on a handshake. Some of you might have heard of it. That's what it was. So we started on this journey, which was incredibly exciting. And so what I've got the benefit of now is that when we started, we were talking about, well, BIM will do this, it will do that. But now I can say, and we can say, actually BIM has achieved these benefits, has achieved these results. So we're in a great position there. But what that project did was it demonstrated some of the things you absolutely have to have. You have to have some good, clear leadership. You have to have a process that allows you to deal with all the things that go wrong. And certainly on the early projects, they're probably still happening now, there are real challenges with simple stuff, the connectivity, the fact that data models won't talk to each other. And so that actually makes things pretty tough at the client level and through the construction supply chains, where you've got to be able to live with the fact that things will go wrong, and they'll be going wrong, and you've never been there before, maybe. The other thing that it demonstrated was that it requires individuals at these early stages to be doing 110% of their job. And that was a big lesson for me, that we can't just go on and do this stuff. We've got to train people. Actually, some of my staff very quickly bought themselves new bits of equipment and things, which really interested me. But to go on this journey does require a lot of extra effort. So whether you're the employer or the individual, recognising that's just part of this thing. It's not just going to happen. You can't just go and buy that. And at the moment, we're still, in one sense, we're still struggling with actually where's the evidence of these things? Where are all the case studies? And I think the case studies need to go beyond just the simple numbers or achievement or attainment, and need to include such things as the cultural challenges, the level of collaboration that was achieved or required, these sort of things. But we're working on that. Now, when I started getting interested in this, I was pretty quickly sort of looking at what aerospace does and what the car industry does. That's the natural thing. And being told by people, you mustn't compare those two industries with what we do. And people still say it, and I still ignore it, because whether you like it or not, there are industries there that have got, this is what they do. So we're talking about BIM, those other industries don't. It's what they do, it's tied in completely to the way they operate, and taking some of those examples I think is very valid, and it's very interesting if you can explore what some of those other industries are doing. You talk to people in the aerospace industry. If you can get yourself into Jaguar Land Rover, get there, because that's really, really good. The other thing that we've noticed is very much a BIM Academy thing. We do quite a bit of work in Asia and Australia, and the different approaches that are starting to evolve around the world. And it strikes me that outside the UK, nobody's got our mandate. That's clear. But what they're doing is people are doing it much more for themselves, and the contractors are doing it just so that they can make the job quicker, cheaper, safer, these sort of things. So BIM is evolving in a different way over there, and I think this is sort of one of the challenges we've got is to look at, well, actually, where are these different approaches working best? Should we be following some of those approaches? And Jason's address, you're clearly a worldwide company, and I think that's going to be quite a challenge for a lot of us, is to don't go out there with the UK baggage of this is what BIM is and this is how you do it, because you're not going to resonate with those people there. So let's strategy. That's a job we just won, the Swansea Bay Lagoon big infrastructure project, and we're working with the client there to develop their strategy, which is going to be fun. So developing a BIM strategy for an organisation is fundamental. And one of the things that we've been talking about for a while is selfish BIM. Anybody? I know there's a lot of BIM wash and talking about BIM bollocks and things, but well, there is, isn't there? But yeah. Selfish BIM? No? Right. Well, I think selfish BIM's great as a term, because and it's come out of really just thinking about why am I doing, as an organisation, why am I getting involved in this? You're getting involved in it because you're working in the public sector and the government's saying you've got to do it. You're working it because you want to be fashionable. You're doing it for loads of reasons that might not be actually the most important one, which is to start doing it so that it benefits your organisation first. That, for me, is absolutely fundamental. And if you're not able to see benefit, and that doesn't have to be simple pound notes, but if you can't see what those benefits are and articulate those around your organisation, then I think you're going to really struggle to put together a meaningful strategy. And the other side of this is, well, if my strategy, I'm not interested, then I think that's valid, because you're actually stating a position. Whether it's very clever is a different thing, isn't it? But we're certainly aware of lots of companies, organisations that are struggling to develop a strategy that works for them. They're really struggling to articulate that strategy to themselves, and some of them are fighting to get a strategy that might be agreed at the board level down into the projects. And I think this is a big challenge for the industry, where at the moment most companies, it's quite easy to see roughly what they do, and you'll go onto a website and it's all there. But we're aware of projects, we're involved in projects where actually the project director decides BIM's not for me, which I just think I'd sack them personally. But so actually, when you're working with organisations, when you're just doing it for yourself, being clear about, right, today's the right day for us to have that, we're going to start on this journey. I don't think we can avoid this journey. It might be that a few who are my sort of vintage can get away with it. But most people, it's sort of happening to them. So being clear about that, I think, is the first thing, and it must be real. That's the thing that's really important for me. There is a clear difference between the way the public sector and the private sector clients are looking at BIM. We did a presentation to a property developer in Mayfair, you know, one of these places where you go into the reception and you're like that to sit. Where's the desk? It was just amazing, amazing place. And there were some of the developers were in the session. They had in-house project team, and it was quite nerve-wracking really, because we obviously weren't connecting with some of the key players in the room. But after about an hour, they started talking to each other, and one of the development surveyors, who hadn't said anything, just asked, are we looking at this for our, beyond construction? And the project manager said, no, we're only interested in construction. And the guy said, well, that's got to be wrong. Surely in 5 years' time, if we haven't got a BIM model attached to our buildings, they're going to be worth less. Well, that was it. Oh, we just sat back. It was wonderful, that penny dropping. But the private sector isn't going to be interested in level 2. Well, do you know, I really didn't want to say that. I wanted to do this without saying anything about the levels and stuff. They won't be worried about all the PASs and stuff like that. They're only going to be interested in actually getting a better product, getting something cheaper, quicker, all of those good things. The public sector, of course, has got a huge challenge, because the mandated departments, and they're the big ones, the MOJ, MOD and things, they're going down the road and they're following the basic protocols. Fine, but local government, where's local government? Very difficult for them, because it's not actually mandated for them. So as a supplier, if I was a contractor now, I'm not sure what I'd do. I'm not sure what I'd do. And I know when the framework stuff started coming in, I was aware of contractors who would have two streams. They'd have the old style, put the boxing gloves on every day and off we go. And then they'd have the collaborative teams. Now I don't, to my knowledge, that didn't work. Seemed like a sensible enough idea, but it just didn't work. So I see a real challenge here for if you're a supplier and you work in those different sectors. Actually, how do I do it? So that brings you back, doesn't it, to actually I've got to make just BIM work for me. So there's a challenge. Certainly no solution, I'm afraid. Another thing that's starting to happen. One example, but there you go. It's a step. A MEP consultant that's really good. He's ahead of the curve on all this, and he's thinking of charging more fees for a non-BIM job. I just leave that thought with you. Actually, it's good, isn't it? Yeah. The bit about the strategy, I think that's people are getting more switched on to this, is as a way of attracting younger staff, and I'm going to do a bit of the generation stuff a bit later on. But actually, having that clear strategy, I certainly know of people who start in organisations that say we're doing this, we're doing that, and then they find that they're not, if they're architects, they're not using all the Revit and the Navisworks and stuff. It's not what they imagined. So they're quietly phoning up the architectural practices that are known to be BIM protagonists. And it again. And so those staff are moving ship, and these practices are not having to spend a lot of money on recruitment fees. So there's some very interesting things that can sort of fall out of developing that strategy. And then, of course, got to be flexible. Yeah, little note there. Got to be flexible. Things like 3D printing, the sort of the new technology that's coming, the mass production, the box units on the new Forth Bridge, They've all come from China. They've been fabricated in a yard. Not sure whether they use Chinese steel or not. I don't know, but they've been fabricated in China. Yeah. Do you know then? No. And they've been fabricated in a yard that apparently is 5 miles long. Wow. So how do we compete with that? So you start to see, some of these things that people have talked about for a long time, the different ways of building things, prefabricated houses or whatever it is. There are definitely out there factories, places where people are starting to think differently about how we deliver our product. So your strategy has got to work with that. So it's a well-known fact that BIM doesn't work for refurbishment projects. Well, the library at Manchester was Grade 2 star listed. We're talking about, is it 80% of the building stock in the UK in 2050 exists now? Something like that. So whether BIM does or doesn't, and I actually know it works brilliantly, it sure as hell has got to. So again, that's got to inform your thinking. How do I actually make whatever BIM is for me work in this world of refurbishment, which is still going to be a significant part of the construction industry's turnover. So this Durham Cathedral, close to where our office is in Newcastle, and we've been quietly working away with them, very, very sort of low-level involvement, really, just starting to, because they're pretty old and slow organisation. But they're trapped into a cycle of a 5-year appointment for a FM company, and the FM company starts and it goes and it does its survey and it does its work for 5 years, and then it's re-tendered, and if that company doesn't win the work, guess what? It takes all the data with it. Bonkers. And that's not just Durham Cathedral. So they're starting to see it as, oh, this is really good stuff now. There's the model, which is simple, the point cloud survey. That's good. They can see what's going on. They can do this stuff of finding big holes or walls that they didn't think were thick are really thick. All these sorts of things. But the really, really, really important thing for them is to use the data that's being gathered to help them manage that facility. So, and that's a pretty common thing that we're starting to see. Actually, the sort of approach to BIM, the tools that are available, certainly surveying is fascinating. When we were looking at the Manchester Library, we had a quote for a traditional survey, old style survey, if you will, and that was 38,000. We had a laser scan survey, it was pretty crude, in all honesty, early days, and that was 42,000. So that staggered me that there was such a small difference. But of course, if you've ever done a circular building, doing a section is tough. It's different, isn't it? It doesn't matter where you go, and that was just wow. We had all that data, and it made it, you could take a section wherever you wanted. Absolutely fantastic. So already then we were discovering that sort of basic stuff, you've got to gather your data, you've got to do your survey, start doing it in a digital fashion, and it just starts to pay these fantastic dividends. The other thing, of course, is that I think the industry looks at, certainly the contracting industry, whether you're a designer or a builder or whatever, looks at refurbishment with a sort of, well, we know it might cost a bit more by the time it's done because we're going to uncover stuff. And although I understand that, I've never gone along with that. Because I think that's really lazy, and that's the industry doing what it does and being allowed to do what it does. What's great about starting to use things like the BIM data is that it makes it much easier for all the parties to understand what's going on. So if there are things that come to light, you can assess them and deal with them more on a cost basis rather than a traditional approach to, well, I'm losing X generally on the project, I'll use this as an excuse to get money back. And of course that's then supporting this whole thing about the data is showing you, just making things more transparent. So the ability to do things quicker in the time that you want them to be done, or it's agreed that it's done, and to a cost base is much more advantage. And for us on the library, we had a programme with the contractor that was looking like February completion. That wasn't really a lot of good. That didn't work. We wanted it before Christmas for our own reasons. And so what the BIM model allowed us to do was to work through, remove the risk. So the contractors approach, oh yeah, actually I can see that, I don't have to allow for that. And so we had a completion that was before Christmas, and sure enough we did it. And the brilliant thing about the project overall was we started off with 96 million for the buildings, and that's what it ended up at. So there is that evidence there, and it gives you that confidence, it gives you that understanding. And another thing that we benefited from, and this is a very important point, is English Heritage and other such organisations are obviously going to be very interested in what you're doing on a refurbishment, if it's a listed building, if it's a conservation area, or whatever. So, although I wish we could get rid of the BIM word, it's almost kind of old-fashioned to me, because BIM for me is all about data, collecting that data and what you do with it. But the showing people who aren't in our industry 3D model, proper working models is hugely valuable. And for us, we got English Heritage to agree to massive interventions and a really significant change to the way we were going to operate the buildings, because they could understand what we were saying. And we did that in the contract time as well, and everybody on the team is convinced that would not have happened old style. So, and again, of course, if you're a supplier and you start to work with English Heritage people or other planners, and they've started to see these models, and you're not providing with them, I'd rather not be in that place actually. So, you know, there are people outside the our direct industry who are starting to see BIM as something that, not expecting it necessarily, but certainly wanting to see it. And my ambition at Manchester was actually to use BIM on a toilet refurbishment, and there's no. It's very simple. The worst job we ever had when I was there was a £5,000 refurb of a toilet, and it was just dreadful. Involved counsellors and all these sorts of things. So I think, you know, don't worry too much about value and things. Just start to look at actually how can these tools help me, and maybe, you know, if you're geeky enough, do it on your own house. One of our guys does actually. Right, Sydney Opera House. We started getting involved with Sydney Opera House when they came out international tender. A lot of you will have been there, I'm sure, and it's almost beyond listing. It's just everything's got to be preserved. They've got the information, the data is in loads of different forms, and they started to realise that maybe this BIM thing would be useful for them. And they international competition, and we won the competition to develop their strategy. And we're now on our third commission with them. We're working there. It's just it's a fantastic job for us, but it's a real great example of a client recognising a need and very much taking the lead, very much getting involved with. Developing a strategy that will embrace new technology because they can see not only their own challenges, but the ones that others have got in maintaining these very complicated buildings. That's a really good one for us. So FM, facilities management and asset management, it's a big prize, always has been in my head, and that's because most of the cost of looking after a facility comes beyond the construction stage. If you've got data that allows you to more effectively run the building, then surely that's got to be good. Now, what we're finding is there's a whole lot of things here, really. I could talk all day about this, but I won't. The clients have heard about this. They maybe read it somewhere and said, or a consultant said, you know what, we ought to use the data from this, whatever, to manage this. Clients say, yes, please, me. And they haven't got a clue about what is involved. There are a lot of people asking for too much. And the FM industry, self-confessed, is right at the start of their journey. And I saw a fantastic presentation at a BIM for FM conference in Manchester. And one of the guys who talked owns an FM company, and he said that he's always wanted to be involved at the beginning of a project. And sure enough, the day came, and he was invited to come along to this project. We need your input. We need you to tell us how much it's going to take to, what we should be doing. Should we be putting those washers up or whatever? And so he went along, and he said it was horrific because he got into the room and he realised he hadn't got a clue what the answers were. And that is a very, very common thing. People saying, I want to be involved at the beginning, I want to do that, but actually finding themselves ill-equipped to answer. Now, this particular individual, that was a shock, but he's starting to recalibrate. He's looking at the way he's running his company. So I suppose there's a bit of a warning, really, that whilst not everybody, people are very much onto this is what we want to do, there are massive challenges, not the least of which is that working through the data, getting into the CAFM system that you've got isn't established. Lots of the dreaded smoke and mirrors, I'm afraid. And of course, there's also that sort of where the world is going with the way that people look at data. Things are done remotely, and there's an expectation that it'll be somewhere from miles away or monitored. We've got to be part of that. Culture and organisation. So this is fundamental. That's a picture of our virtual project, which we run, 3-day course. Be a project team, can be people from different companies. It works very well. I think the interesting thing about the culture and the organisation is that collaboration is key there. And I don't know whether any of you have ever looked up a definition of collaboration, but there are a couple that I find useful. One is that it's two or more parties working together for the mutual benefit and gain. That's the one that's easy to understand. But there's also another one, which is one or more parties combining together to conspire against another. It's great, isn't it? Isn't that contracting? Love it. It's also, I think, this bit about the age is important. I think not supposed to go on about these things, but certainly the baby boomers who've run a lot of companies thus far, they're starting to disappear. Looking at Generation X, Generation Y, their expectations, their desires, their knowledge, and I'm certainly aware of a number of small companies run by younger people, and their thinking is completely different. And I do some work for a guy, a consultant, and he's got a small company, 16 people, and one of the things he's done is he has his leave policy is 40 days a year. If you want his number, I'll tell you later. But it's 20 days phone on, 20 days phone off. So, there are people, Ryder always in the top 100 employers. There's a whole lot of stuff there that I think that BIM making sure that you're sort of looking forward as to how you're going to attract people in, how you're going to get your new staff is just so important. And don't be frightened of appealing to the youngsters out there. The other thing, of course, about culture and organisation is maybe recognising when you need some help. I probably don't need to expand on that, other than I think a lot of places people don't really appreciate exactly what their challenges are, and don't be shy of going out and getting some assistance. So procurement, Northumbria University, that's where we are. It's the elephant in the room, frankly, and I haven't got enough time to talk about the complexities of procurement, but I just do flag up that I think the industry needs to take this one very strongly. There's a lot of people at a client level who are procuring. They're being given advice by organisations who seem to be piling on. There's more and more boxes to tick. I don't get it. Are there people who actually can evaluate properly these bids that are coming in? I don't see how, because there isn't the experience there. So procurement, no solutions to it. It's very much something we don't often talk about. But I think recognising the way, wherever you are in the organisation, just looking at the way you procure, and just beware of buying the answers to these questions if you're responding, because you might not be getting found out now, but I bet you will soon. Not that any of you would be doing that, of course. So, closing thoughts. So you need a clear strategy, review that regularly, recognise what's happening around the world, that's hugely important. Look at what manufacturers are doing, they're starting to come together. I'm certainly aware of examples here. There's definitely a skewed demographic at the moment in the industry. I'll do it the other way around, too few people entering it. That's probably a better way to say it. Do have a look at what organisations like G4C within Constructing Excellence are doing. Do have a look at documents like 2050, which is the young group within the task group that put their thinking together. Whether you agree with it or not, it just doesn't really matter. And we absolutely won't be talking about BIM soon. It'll become part of what we do. But what I'd like to just finish on is, I don't normally do this, but I started off with something I don't normally do, so I'll end it with something I don't normally do. And it's a quote from an article that John Norton wrote on Sunday. And even though I don't understand a lot of what he says in The Observer, I find him an interesting read. So, quoting directly, the internet, and put this in the context of, will we be talking about BIM in the future? The internet has become what historians of technology call a GPT, a general purpose technology, like steam power, electricity, mass production, and the automobile. In 1999, Andy Grove, then CEO of Intel, was widely ridiculed for declaring that in 5 years' time, there won't be any internet companies. All companies will be internet companies or they will be dead. What he meant was that anybody who aspired to be in business in 2004 would have to deal with the internet in one way or another, just as they relied on electricity. And he was right. That's what a GPT is like. It's pervasive. Thank you.